And yes, we want to welcome our wonderful guests today. We have in the room already with us Urs Nigli and Helmi Abulesh. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. And Vandana Shiva will be joining us as well. I'm not sure she's in the room already. Is she? Yes, she is. Hello, Vandana.
Hi.
Lovely to see you. Hello. Welcome. So thank you to all three of you for joining us from afar and online, which is wonderful. Technology allows for these things. Now, Vandana's on a completely different time zone to us. So we're going to have her for a short half hour because then we want to let her go and rest with her busy agenda. She has a lot to do tomorrow for sure. So we'll enjoy your time while you're with us, Vandana, and invite you to watch the recording afterwards with the rest of the conversation, because these conversations are turning out to be very juicy around the topic of regeneration and the journey that we share together. So with that, I would like to give the word to my colleague Simon Kramer, our policy advisor for the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. Oh, thank you. No, sorry. I almost jumped this very important part, which these are the rules of engagement. These are the terms of engagement of joining this space. This is how we invite people to join us and to be here with this energy, which is to speak and listen with respect, to keep external noises off. So keep your microphone off while you're not speaking. Be punctual whenever you can. And yes, we identify problems. However, we aim to focus our time and energies on thinking of solutions. We also ask people to be concise and not repeat what other people have said. We can agree with people, and at the same time, let's go to new stuff. And finally, two very important spiritual practices, Ubuntu. We are part of a larger tribe than ourselves. I am because that tribe is, because that community is. And so we're here because we're part of the community, and we cannot be without community. And mudita, which is a high Buddhist concept, which basically has to do with we are part of a higher intelligence than ourselves. And when we channel that intelligence and we shine, it's a common shine. When someone is shining and channeling something amazing, they're doing it because we're all here listening, and their shine is our shine. So a very elevated concept that we invite you to practice as well. Those are our terms of engagement. And we also suggest to everyone in the room that you write your name and your country and your occupation, and if you want, your LinkedIn in the chat, so that you can get to see who's here. And there's people from all over Europe, and there's people from all around the world joining us here. Hundreds of people have signed up, and lots of people are going to be watching this afterwards. So thank you all for being there. And those who are here live, please do write your name, country, and occupation and LinkedIn in the chat. Thank you. And if you have any questions along the way of this interesting session, please do write them in the chat, because we will curate those questions and put those questions to our speakers. So thank you very much. And thanks, Megan, for kicking it off. And that's what we want to hear from you and see from you is who you are and why you're here, what you have to do with farming, what's your occupation, and anything you want to share with the rest of the people here. So fantastic. With that, and now I will pass the word on to Simon Kramer, our policy advisor. On to you, Simon.
Thank you so much, Anna, for kicking us off into this wonderful webinar. Also from my humble self, thank you so much for joining, especially for the speakers taking the time, but also our amazing founding farmers. We'll already adapt a little bit to our first webinar, and the core will be to give more the lead of the discussion, really the facilitation into the hands of the farmers. So I'll just give a super brief framing and then hand over to Peter Fröhlich, who's one of our founding farmers. Tonight we ask a question a little bit provocatively, because we hope that we can have in this space, with the wonderful agreements of engagement that Anna shared and introduced, really just have an informed and differentiated discussion in which we, of course, don't need to answer anything absolutely, but understand better how on our context-specific journeys we can steward for more rolling system regeneration. And with that, I would give over to Peter to introduce himself, his farming family, his journey, and kick us off in the evening. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, actually, Simon. Yeah, my name is Peter. I'm actually a farmer just north of Zurich, very close to Zurich Airport. So whenever you're in Switzerland, please come by. I run a family farm. We grow 7 crops. We do cover crops everywhere. We have no-till practice. We have compost tea in action. There's a lot going on. So we have apple trees produce our juice that we sell directly. Little bit of meat production. It's still a conventional farm, though we dramatically reduced use of any crop protection products or actually mineral fertilizers, because we don't need them anymore, not because we had the target to do that. It just came with all the measures we have implemented. I'm also very much engaged into making all that transition and the outcomes measurable. So that's what I have a company for called AgriCircle, where we actually make Regen Ag measurable and through that manageable. So much about myself. I hand over to Diego.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Diego Bárcena. So I have a bit of my journey started in a molecular biology lab in Barcelona, then London. I did my PhD then in synthetic biology and in a systems biology department where I worked together with many physicists. So I'm glad to see Vandana here as a physicist. I respect that very much. And at some point, I got tired a bit of the narrow view to problem solving of the scientific world at the moment, the techno-scientific world, basically reduced to one gene, one solution, one function. And so I was thinking a bit out of the box, and I just quit my career and started a small farm in the north of Spain. Small, very small, so it's less than a hectare. It's a vegetable garden, a market garden, very bio-intensive, and yeah, we're trying to. I think for us it was the easiest way to start into this farming. We have no family background or anything in farming, so we had an easy way to access the land yeah, the regenerative journey in my case is that we started from a very, very degraded soil, basically absolutely no organic matter, and this is our 5th year now, and we are slowly but surely generating more fertility. We don't have the capacity to measure it because we're just very small, but I think so. What I would say just is that I really would like that more people join farming. So I come from a profession that was the 1%, no, the 1% of the science, the life sciences, and now again I'm in another 1%, which is the farming in Europe. At least there's very, very few farmers in Europe nowadays. So I think that I would what I'm trying is to lead by example and try to open the path for people that want to join this. And I think, yeah, in a small farm is the easiest starting point. And yeah, I lead to Beate quickly.
Just a
Thank
moment,
you, Diego.
Beate.
Sure, Anna.
Beate, if you don't mind, and because I know that Vandana doesn't have much time, is
Exactly.
it okay? Yes?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Beate. Beate is a wonderful EARA farmer who will introduce herself shortly. But before that, as you were saying, Diego, thinking outside the box, well, one of those people who has shown us the way in thinking outside the box is Vandana Shiva. She has inspired many around the world, many of us, to look at farming differently and food differently and seeds and women and the role that we all have to play in the food system. So Vandana, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey with farming and regeneration.
As Diego mentioned, I was trained in physics. I did a PhD in the foundations of quantum theory on a topic called hidden variables and non-locality, the 2 big issues of indeterminism and non-separation of quantum theory. But something that troubled me a lot was the assumption, that the more science technology you introduce in a society, there's less poverty. But I saw when trawlers were brought in, the fishermen got poorer. When logging was brought in, tribal communities got poorer. So I spent 3 years looking at the relationship between science, technology, and society at the IIM Bangalore. And then I happened to get, because I'd done so much work on ecology, I was invited by the Ministry of Environment to do a few major studies, which led to serious outcomes, like mining in Doon Valley being stopped by a Supreme Court order. And I just realized that, tiny efforts in solidarity with nature and people had meaning. So I started the Research Foundation, and later I started Navdanya. Why did I get into agriculture? I got into agriculture in 1984. That's the year India experienced two big tragedies. One was in the land of Punjab, where I did my MSc honors in particle physics, which was very peaceful when I studied in the early 70s. By 84, it was a land of war. 15,000 people were killed, and there were massive farmers' protests. And I wanted to get to the root of why are farmers so angry. And that same year in the city of Bhopal, 2nd December, 1984, 40 years ago, a pesticide plant leaked and killed thousands. 20,000 is the figure from the people of Bhopal. And they said, we've been turned into a gas chamber. And so I was working for the United Nations University at that time on a program called Conflicts over Resources. And I said, these are conflicts, and I want to study, the scientific conflict, the paradigm. I want to study the technological conflicts, the accountability conflicts, and I did. So I wrote the book called The Violence of the Green Revolution, which for me was an understanding of what really happened to Punjab and what's the Green Revolution. But the second thing, I cannot do science and investigate a problem. And, just like you, he moved into taking care of the land. I realized I had to seek a better way of doing agriculture. And I didn't know what it would be. I just called it non-violent farming. Ahimsa, Keshik. Ahimsa is, the word for non-violence. And I said, I'm going to look for peace. I'm just going to look for ahimsa. And then, of course, started to find every place where I could learn. It was the farmers. It was books like Albert Howard and the Agricultural Testament, which interestingly, he learned the principles from India, but he's called the father of modern organic farming. And the two principles he learned was Indian peasants always farm with diversity. They never farm monocultures. And I was so happy to hear the farmers were talking about 7 crops and 7 products and diversity as the way. And the second was always recycling, the law of return, that nature does not work by extraction. Nature works through constantly recycling and renewing. And that to me is regeneration. In 2015, at the climate march in New York, a few of us were realizing that the organic movement was being very violently attacked. There was a systemic attack, not only because organic farmers were doing well, but also because the organic sector was supporting the anti-GM movement, So if there were marches of GMO-free, it would be the companies that had become successful. And so clearly it used to be stated, the billionaire companies, the poison cartel, would always say, oh, these rich organic companies are financing these protests. So we said we just need to multiply. And that's what India has always done. Increase the naming, just create more descriptions, because there's so many ways to describe the right way of farming. And so we came up with the word regenerative agriculture, 2015. And then we met in Costa Rica, and the founders were Hans Haran, who was the chair of the International Assessment for IASTD, the Science Technology for Development. Andre Liu, who many of you will know, he was for 2 terms the president of IFARM. Ronnie Cummins, who had started the Consumer Association, and we feel sad that he passed away with cancer, as so many friends are going, and me. And in Costa Rica, we formed Regeneration International, and we laid out the principles of what regeneration is. For me, what is regeneration? Regeneration is first and foremost overcoming the mythology of the period of colonialism and industrialism that nature is dead. You know, that's what Bacon constructed. That's what Descartes constructed. All of the theorizing about nature was inert, passive object to be manipulated and tortured. Bacon even wrote in his book, The Masculine Birth of Time, "Come, I will teach you how to make nature your slave." Yeah, that for him was science, and it emptied nature of life. So regeneration is first and foremost realizing that nature is alive and creative. Every part of the soil, when not harmed, just given a little bit of the return of what the earth has given us, whether in biodynamic ways or in permaculture ways or in organic ways. You can just choose the way you say thank you to Mother Earth. That creates the living soil. And we don't create the mycorrhizal fungi. We do not create the earthworms. We do not create the beneficial bacteria that break down organic matter. All this is created by the soil food web. And the more care we give to the soil, the richer is this diversity of the soil food web. Anna, you talked about how we have to strive towards, you know, healthy nature, healthy people. I've just done a book called Nature of Nature, the metabolic disorder of climate change, because I think for too long we've thought mechanically, and the mechanical mind cannot find the solutions of the problems it has created, thinking that, you know, the soil is merely an empty container for pouring nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium into. That every species is an enemy of every other species, and insects are our enemy. So when people wonder how the insects disappeared, you know, look at the chemicals we are using that treated them as an enemy and pushed them to extinction. So regenerative agriculture is about following the laws of how a creative, dynamic earth works. And of course, the background note that was sent, it doesn't matter where you begin. And that's why it doesn't matter how you are today. You could be a conventional farmer, you could be a large-scale farmer, you could be a small organic farm. It doesn't matter where, but following the laws of regeneration, which are laws of nature, laws of renewal, that a seed becomes a seed. That's a regenerative law. So every time we use non-renewable seeds, we are violating regenerative principles. The soil regenerates itself. We can reverse desertification. And the principles that I have learned over these many, many years is there's nothing like an inert and static nature and a dead nature. And it's alive and it's under dynamic change in every dimension of it. And as the Spanish-Chilean scientists have, I think they've given us a word that is creating a whole new awakening for the world, the word of autopoiesis. Nature is autopoietic. A seed is autopoietic. Living soil is autopoietic. A living farm is autopoietic. It writes its poetry. It's self-organized. And the earth herself is a living organism that has the capacity and potential to regulate a climate. And that is what has been destabilized. So just like our health has been destabilized by ultra-processed food and we have metabolic disorders, the Earth's systems have been destabilized with junk energy. But it doesn't mean that we cannot address it if we look at how do the Earth as a self-regulating superorganism regulate a temperature. And you mentioned the word intelligence, Anna. I think a big part of denial of life was a denial of intelligence. And to me, it's fascinating that the more they try and hit living systems and living organisms on the head, the more in little nooks and corners, someone is doing brilliant work on plant intelligence. Someone else is doing brilliant work on our gut microbiome as a second brain, and all the intelligence of every bit of the microbiome. And so the denial of life and intelligence that was part of a system that began with the assumption of a dead earth, regenerative thinking is emerging in nooks and corners. And that's what emergence is all about. Yeah, that new things emerge out of complexity. I am right now busy. The reason I need to get some sleep is that I start very early morning with the 1 month course we offer on return to earth. How do you return to earth? First in our minds, by overcoming this dead earth syndrome and understanding the regenerative powers of every seed, every plant, the birds, the insects. And then, of course, we work through the living seed, the living soil, living food. Food itself is living when it's produced through living processes. So, yes, diversity in where we start, but the laws of regeneration and renewal are laws of ecology. They're laws that have to be followed no matter where. And that's what we have to all strive for. And we don't have to begin with sameness, but we do need to imagine a recognition that regeneration is about obeying the laws of the earth, the laws of ecology, understanding them. They've been erased again and again and again. And with all the experience, with all the farmers who probably got together to form the European Alliance, to realize that when you love the earth and give care to the earth, she actually gives you in abundance. So this idea of scarcity and pulling out more, and it just kind of falls by the wayside. So a lot of regeneration is about our relationship with the living earth. Thank you. Oh, and I just mentioned the same course we are doing now, 15th September to 15th October. We repeat it every year, so we will have it again next year at Navdanya.
Thank you for that, Vandana. So many concepts there that are so logical and grounded that you've shared with us. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite our other two international guests to introduce themselves. And we would, if you're still there, Vandana, when they finish, we'd like to ask you a question as well. So maybe you can stay a few more minutes. Your microphone is off. Your microphone is off.
It's way past my sleeping time.
Oh.
And if I stay up beyond now, I will be in a daze tomorrow. So if you will excuse me, and I would stay to listen, but I'm sure when you say it's been recorded, I'll be able to listen later. I hope so. And the very best to all of you for renewal, regeneration, and strength. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vandana, and thank you for sharing your energy, your time, your vision, your wisdom. Really, we hope to have you here again sometime. Have a good rest. Thank you. Yes, so on to our other guests then, and we'd love to have Urs Nikli. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey and your vision of regeneration.
Thanks a lot, Anna. My name is Urs Nikli. I had been director of the Research Institute for Organic Farming, FIBL, for 30 years, from 1990 to 2020. And since I left, I set up the Institute of Agroecology with a wider approach, more than organic, but also organic. For instance, what we have done, we developed the best organic program in Switzerland for Aldi Swiss, the discounter, and it's organic without antibiotics. It's for animal production. It's organic without any use of copper and other problematic pesticides, organic pesticides, and each farm is undergone holistic sustainability assessment. So it's some kind of organic plus, even in Switzerland compared to BioSwiss. But on the other hand, we have also we have also done a lot of work on better defining and further development. What does a transition to agroecology means? At the moment, we have a new project in Switzerland with many farmers and a huge budget from the Swiss government to go through a transition towards organic, towards agroecological farming with a huge group of farmers, and to integrate also consumers, because there is no sustainable production without a sustainable consumption. Meanwhile, this is absolutely clear that it has to go in parallel in each country. So sustainable agriculture and sustainable consumption. And we want to learn more why people understand sustainable consumption on the one hand, and understand the problem that meat consumption of 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 to 70 kilogram per capita and per year, that this can never be a sustainable farm, can never be in line with sustainable farming production, and also food waste cannot be in line with sustainable agriculture. So both need to develop, and we want to understand why people know that but don't change their food habits. And we want to better understand how what motivates people to change their consumption habits. Is it better explain the theory, better explain the facts? Is it better cooperation with farmers, see what the real problems of farmers are, or any kind of incentives? We want to check and monitor why people, how could we support people to change their eating habits? So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And I was on the iFarm board for a few years, and I was an early promoter of organic, and I was and I tried to, for 30 years, I tried to solve all the practical, technical problems of organic farming, and therefore seeing the limits within the organic regulation, that some problems can never been solved. I expanded my focus on agroecological approach, which are not so much under certification and under strict bans like organic farming.
Thank you for that, Urs. You've touched on a lot of the issues that are certainly hot topics today that we'd like to discuss, and that we will go into in the conversation after this. And so after these presentations, I would like to ask Helmi Abuleish to please introduce yourself as well. And then I will give back to Peter Verheyen to guide the conversation between us.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Helmi Abuleish from Egypt, where I'm working here since 47 years, an initiative called SECAM in the desert. And this is an initiative based on biodynamic farming, which is a good source of inspiration for both the organic movement and the regenerative agricultural movement. And yeah, over the 40 years, we could prove that biodynamic farming actually works in Egypt, works in the whole delta area of Egypt, but also works in the desert. And it handles in a perfect way all these big challenges of a country like Egypt in particular, where 7 million smallholder farmers sit on 7 million acres of land. So each one has an acre to feed himself and his family, where we have water scarcity since 20 years now. So we don't have enough water actually to increase our area or to produce all the crops we need, where we have dying soils with a lot of the highest possible chemical inputs, chemical fertilizers and pesticides in the world per area. And at the same time, a country where the food quality is very, very low and health issues are increasing every day, because as we all know, diet and diet-related health issues are nearly 60–70% of our health problems in the country. And all this, and with diminishing diversity, we are the second most impacted country in the world by climate change, and climate change starts to hit us. So these are challenges which many countries in different ways feel, but with biodynamic farming, we could prove that we can enlive soils, we can produce all kinds of crops, we can handle salinity, we can use less water, we can sequester carbon in our soils and trees, and improve livelihoods for our farmers. And still, after 40 years of our initiative, a little bit along the lines of course, the question, why are we only at 2% of Egypt's area and production? And this is a question which is a global question. And if in Europe, in Germany, it's 6%, or anywhere else it's 4 or 7 or 8, but we are still a small niche in this organic, biodynamic, regenerative agricultural sector. And this is when we started to study, and I know that Urs and others here know it, of course, but we started the real issues of the real costs in comparison between conventional and biodynamic food in Egypt. And the result was, no surprise, biodynamic is much cheaper if you would consider all the hidden costs of conventional farming, if you do not allow externalization of costs. And this is scientifically a very nice result, but the same question Urs had, it doesn't really affect, even if you tell it to the consumer, it doesn't change his purchase behavior. So you can say whatever you want, still most of the consumers, when they go into Aldi or any other supermarket, buy on price. And so we had then to search for a way, how can we show the real price? How can we prove that we are not only more efficient, tastier, healthier, but also cheaper than conventional food? And then we were searching for ways to honor our farmers for their ecosystem services. We started to calculate the carbon sequestration of the smallholder farmers. And guess what? We found out that in Egypt, smallholder farmers on this 1 acre can sequester in soils, in trees, or avoid the emittance in compost making of 6 to 10 tons per acre. And this is an additional income when you sell them on the voluntary carbon market, which really makes a difference, which enables these farmers to have a better livelihood, send their kids to school, at the same time sell their biodynamic products at conventional prices in the local market, and using this lever for system change by honoring the farmers' ecosystem service in regard only to climate change, let alone biodiversity change, water change, and everything else, but really only for the carbon credits. We could now start a movement to help farmers to go into transition. We started with 2,000 in 2022. We are currently at 15,000. We want to reach 40,000 before the end of 2025. And we are already dreaming about 250,000, which then would give us about 20% of Egypt's area. And then I think it would be relevant for system change. So we believe that there's really a huge potential in regenerative agriculture to contribute to the much, much needed system change, which everyone knows, but we are still lacking models of how to implement. And so I'm happy to share this experience because it's not an Egyptian experience. We are in the meantime working in India, Tanzania, Kenya, Tunisia, Brazil, and many, many other countries. And it's not a special intellectual property. It's something which also in Europe, climate farmers and others are already using. And I think it's something which we have over the next years to come to really use much more if we want to see rapid on deck of regenerative agriculture, organic, biodynamic, permaculture, agroecology. I don't care for the name. I care for the change. And then we do steps together into the right future. Thank you.
Absolutely, Helmi. Thank you so much. They're so inspiring and great resources that you're creating. What a huge impact. If there's any links that you would like to share, Helmi, in the chat, people are really interacting there. And so please do share some links to information that people can have a look at and be inspired by and use as examples and imitate those examples, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to like inoculate everyone around the world. And for that, we need shining examples and just stories of people who are doing it. And speaking of people who are doing it and stories, Beate is the farmer from EARA who is still missing to be introduced in this meeting. So please, Beate, do introduce yourself and your story, which is also quite special. And Beate also comes from the financing world. So it's super interesting because some of the things you were touching about there, Helmi, also have to do a lot with what Beate does and also you, Urs. So please, Beate, introduce yourself and lead us on in this conversation.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for that. Yes, indeed. With everything that has been said, I think there would be so many questions already that I would either love to relate to or just send follow-up questions to. So I come indeed from the financial background. I love and studied mathematics back then in Germany, then had an international career. And during a sabbatical, that is me and my husband, picked up on a hobby that we always had. So despite sitting in those financial centers around the world, we always loved doing soil workshops on the weekend. Our 5 square meters in Singapore were just filled to the brim with green stuff. I studied environmental management, a second master thesis on the side. And so during the sabbatical, we took time to really reevaluate a little bit what's driving us, and ended up living in Greece, taking over an old donkey farm and becoming olive oil farmers, with immediately realizing the way that is being cultivated around us, the way that we want to produce it for our family is not aligned. So we went down the rabbit hole, did the research and said it has to be regenerative. So when I hear Vandana speak, Urs and Hemley, I actually feel like a complete newbie with so little experience because it only has 6 years. But on the other hand, it makes me realize that even without this experience, if we do the research and make use of what's already there and cooperate with nature, it can actually be a success story in a really short amount of time. So we were able to transfer our land, we were able to win international awards, and then to spread out and offering now soil biology tests and customized soil microbes to other farmers to help them do the transition, but also lower their expenses. So that's my summary. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Beate, so much for everything that you do. And maybe you would like to lead with one of those questions that has come up for you and then pass it on to Peter for him to ask them questions too.
Sure. Yes, one, and I would love to hear Diego's and Peter's view on that as well, even though we've discussed a little bit of it already in person a couple of times. But something that came up now with all of the 3 guests that we had speaking is really, we do see what's working. We do have an understanding of how it's working. We do see that consumers, when they are informed about it, they do have a sincere interest. Yet it's not really changing the needle, and we can't see the impact that one should think regenerative agriculture and organic farming systems would have. So if you also, Helmi, would like to touch on that, what's your take on what is the number one thing missing right now really to unlock a bigger share for organic and even more so for regenerative? That would be great. And then I would love to follow up and pass on to Peter.
Should I start with the answer, or Helmi, are you ready? Okay, then I start. I'm not so pessimistic, I have to confess. For instance, organic is at the moment really not growing. It's even decreasing. For instance, the country with the highest proportion of organic farming, 25%, 27%, is Austria. And for the first time in the last 2 years, there was a decrease of the number of organic farmers and organic area. So at the moment, people are not so optimistic because people do no longer buy so much organic food. And so it's really the consumer at the moment who are not who have other problems at the moment. That's the main reason. And although from the EU Commission, there are many activities supporting the consumption and the production of organic farming, but the goals of the farm to fork strategy won't be achieved with 25% organic farming. And so this is the reality, but nonetheless, I'm quite optimistic because I see how regenerative agriculture, all kind of system-oriented farming, and all kind of sustainable food consumption, that the ideas and the facts around all that has entered the entire farm and scientific community. For instance, in Germany, I have worked for the last 3 years on a perspective brochure paper on food and farming research. And this is from the Scientific Council of Germany. And in a way, it was the initiative where all the official administration in Germany, they wanted to see the way forward for the entire agricultural research. And reading that brochure, it's all about we need a science approach, a system approach. We need a multi and interdisciplinary way of thinking and of combining many different fields, because we cannot, what Diego said, we can no longer reduce to one gene. That's bullshit. That doesn't help us. So we need to put in innovation into a system approach. And so many of the ideas of the regenerative and organic and biodynamic pioneers and people has already entered the entire scientific and administration, and it has become common ground. So at the moment we progress, and we can not only look at organic farming, because all these ideas have already influenced the scientific community, for instance, and also those making decision, policymakers. Therefore, I'm quite positive about the development.
So I can just echo the optimism of Urs out of the reasons he mentioned, but I have, in addition to this, two other point of views. The one is that I think system change is in the air, whether we recognize or not, and everybody is recognizing it. And system change will come either out of crisis or enlightenment, but it will come anyhow. So I'm very, very optimistic that we will not be able to bend the earth to any other direction. So it's just a question how much pressure it will need from us to move. And maybe many people follow an enlightenment path and make it out of self-motivation. This is the one thing. And the other thing is, of course, that as I just said, as soon as regenerative, organic, biodynamic products will be acknowledged as not only being better, but also being more efficient, more productive, more profitable, and cheaper, then there is no question. There is nobody in the market, no consumer who will then by intention say, no, I'm for the conventional product at the same price. And I'm very happy that scientists like Urs over the last 30 years have already proven that organic can feed the world in general. So for those who come up always as the argument, yeah, then we have not enough food. This is total nonsense, because we can feed 15 billion if we want on the existing area. It's not a question of being able to feed or not, it's what quality. And are we killing soils or regenerating soils and ecosystems? So I'm hopeful that the example we are using at the moment with ecosystem services to adjust at this displaced price on the shelf, and this is a distortion of subsidies and many, many other things, which we adjust with carbon credits. And I want to say it very loud and clear. In the perfect world, we do not need carbon credits. We do not need ecosystem services. We need consumers to pay the just price. But whereas this is not yet happening, as we can all see in all the markets, we are just at the moment and for a certain time using this tool to adjust this unjust price on the shelf. And I can see a huge potential, because on a race to zero, as the whole world needs, and this is over the next 30, 40 years, the focus of the whole world community, we need natural-based solutions, agriculture, forestry, agroforestry, oceans, of course. We need the natural-based solutions to offset the other side. Nobody of us can go to zero, otherwise we have to commit suicide and close down everything. So there will be still gigatons which need to be balanced out by nature. Hence, there is a job to do for our climate heroes, the real climate heroes of the world, the farmers. And so in this regard, I'm very optimistic that this will show more and more every day, and will return not only the livelihood, but also the position, the social reputation of farming and the farmer. And I saw a question in the chat. Should I answer now, Anna, or should I? The question was, what about the social part of the whole story? And obviously, for those who know SECAM is built on what we call economy of love. So it's really not about only prices. And when we ask our farmers every year, the 15,000 smallholder farmers, what do you like about this economy of love certification and carbon credits? It's not the additional income, if you believe it or not. It's being seen, being listened to, being part of a community, being valued and honored, which matters most for them. And then it's the additional income on the second and third level. So yes, of course, it needs holistic development. It needs economic development, social development, cultural development, as much as ecological sustainable development. So in this regard, I'm very, very optimistic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing much more happening, and it's happening every day, and more interest in our approaches are there everywhere in the world.
Thank you both
so
for
much,
that.
both of you. Yes, well, there's wonderful positive messages of hope and optimism, which we share. And there's more and more people, like you say, connecting with this around the world. Unfortunately, it's not on the news or the front pages of the newspapers, while it should be. But the good news is that more and more people are walking this road and realizing these things. Thank you so much. Peter, no doubt this has generated even more comments from you. So please, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Dana. Yeah, if I just may share some things that happened to me and where I see some hurdles that I had to overcome. So when I started about 7 years ago, and now I compare soils, that is really a lot of a difference. So you're quite able to move the needle very quick. I think the first changes, you see them after 1 or 2 years already. So I just want to share one thing that I see as kind of an overarching topic, which is about the state of our Earth. So one day I just realized how much we're depending on biomass and what it all is. I mean, it starts with oil, gas, plastics, coal. Whatever you touch in a day is most likely going to be biomass. And what kind of made me really angry is when I saw that biomass productivity on the Earth has been actually cut in half by humans. So we have large deforestation, mainly that happened in China, India, the Middle East, Madagascar, and Europe. That's before the start of the climate calculation, where still land use change is one of the biggest contributors. Now, having cut that in half is like linked to having cut soils in half. And then having cut life in half. And I can just refer to that to your own body. So let's say from tomorrow onwards, you eat half of what you eat normally today. So that means you're going to have half in your stomach, that's our soils. But then also you'll be only half of yourself because you're going to be much slimmer. So half life being present on the Earth. And that I feel is something we really have to tackle. And that's our kind of ecological income we need to battle for. We need to make up for this. And I believe that to be able to have a biomass productivity of a forest in an agricultural system is something we have to achieve. And the question is how we do that. And to me, that is bringing together everything, everywhere on the planet and taking the best to create this new agriculture for. So I would pledge for a very open and collaborative approach. And the good news here is, I mean, you see those changes in life creation. I mean, just this spring, I had soil samplers on my fields, and then for a project, they're also sampling on my neighbors' fields, and they were like phoning me when they were in my fields to ask, hey, what have you done? I'm like, you know, in your neighbor's fields, it was all silent, and I have to close the cab. It's so many insects around. So what have you done differently? And that's the changes we need to see. And it's really this connection from biomass productivity to soil depletion to actually life creation ability of that soil, because life is only created microbes interacting with plants, enabling higher organisms to thrive. So if we don't fix that, there's, well, I would say no hope. So we have to fix this. There's no alternative. And all I see happening is it's hope out there. We know how to do this. What I see and what was tough for me is exactly also the social part. So what Helmi is doing is actually really important to do this with the community, with the farmers around you, because the first thing you have to overcome is kind of becoming the clown of the town, because you're doing everything a little bit different. And that's, to me, that was actually the biggest challenge. Once you overcome that one, you can go far. And yeah, I think we also have to work with new technology. I've seen lots of pushback on new tech, be it laser weeding whatsoever, especially also from the organic community. And then something we have to work, because I feel there's a lot, especially when it comes to measuring outcomes. And that's something I work with my company on. So there we really can deploy technology that could not have been deployed, I would say, 2 years ago. So it's really new concepts that we can put in place to measure outcomes, to challenge farmers in a new way, make them do the right stuff, that they understand how they can move the needle on their specific farm, in their context. And if we can get that going, we can really, I saw it myself. I only learned how to transform my farm with those metrics. And they're really helpful. So we should actually build on this. We just announced quite some collaboration. You can see it in my LinkedIn, that we want to build an infrastructure at global scale to measure those things. I think that's something we need to prove, and we should be proving to everybody else. But actually, I've talked already way too much. So yeah, over to Beate to share maybe a little bit of your challenges that you have been overcoming.
Happy to do that. But actually, let me just summarize and then pass on to Diego, because I would like to hear different opinions as well, rather than just my point of view. But to wrap this up, first of all, yeah, thanks to all three of us, because my question is definitely not or wasn't intended a way to be very pessimistic. I share your optimism, and hearing your perspective actually makes me feel less naive about it, because like you put it, Peter, I'm also the clown of the town here, the alien being laughed about. So sometimes it's good to hear it's part of the process, but also there's others out there having a very similar opinion. What I was coming from, and we could maybe touch on that later on, but I would really like to pass it on to Diego, is that I do not see it being reflected yet in a lot of the systematic changes that I would think are needed. So Anna mentioned my shameful financial background. So in that whole industry, which, whether we like it or not, is just dominating a lot of the economic processes, the legislation, the regulation, just everything we can think about, we haven't reached them yet. And I think there's huge opportunity. I do not see it so much as something that is hurting me every day or makes me cry every day, but there's just like a huge opportunity that we would be able to unlock and untap if we knew how. So with that, Diego, what's your take on that, or would you like to pose another question?
I don't know. Just, I mean, my context again is just a very small scale farmer, and in coming back to Peter's point about the technical innovation, how to apply it, like for me, it's just, yeah, it's a scaling issue, no? Like it's how do you, obviously, if you have a, depends on what you grow, depends on what you're measuring, no, depends on the output, but on a first, like I would like to find a way to pass these technological innovations to like for every farmer, no, like also for the small farmers, no, because not everybody wants to farm on 60 hectares or 70 hectares, no, and not everybody should, right? I think like there should be a space for everyone also, no. But what I'm hearing from everybody here, and like just to summarize it, is that the goal seems to be to focus more on social innovation and not so much on technical innovation, no? Society nowadays rewards way more the technical innovation, no? If you see the grants and the money that flows into anything that has to do with technical innovation, anything that when you read innovation in the EU, it's always technical, it's never social innovation, no? So that's why it's very impressive to hear what Helmi has achieved in Egypt, no, like because it seems to be scaling. It's a social innovation, and it seems to be scaling. So I don't know. For me, the big question is, how do you think, Helmi, we can implement this in Europe? I mean, EARA, we're trying to join forces through EARA. I think it's a wonderful organization where we come in many different contexts together, and like from the big farmers to the small farmers, and we're talking together, not fighting each other, and conventional farmers, organic farmers, and it's good. We need, this is a social innovation, right, in the end. So that this is like, for me, But Helmi, what do you see that how can Europeans, how can we save ourselves? What can we learn from you?
Should I directly answer, or do you want to gather? Yeah, I'm not an expert for Europe. I'm an expert for the desert. So of course I don't want to even give the feeling I know the answer for Europe. It's not the case. What I know is it works in Europe. I know this from the Humusbauern in Austria. I know this from my friends from the climate farmers. Some of them are co-founders and in the EARA movement. They are doing it already. I know that there are obstacles which have to do with this biggest of all distortions in agricultural markets and farming over the world, which is the EU subsidy system, which is a totally weird system and makes every farmer in the EU get 50 or 60% of his income from a subsidy, not from his work, which I can gladly say we don't have this luxury in Egypt, which makes it maybe easier in Egypt. I don't know. But what I can say is that it's also possible in Europe. It needs, and let's maybe discuss this once on a very specific talk with the experts from Europe. As I said, there are 2, 3, 4 initiatives I can call upon in Europe trying to do the same. And it works, obviously. It works everywhere, most probably better than in the desert. And maybe then it needs that we jointly create awareness, create markets, lobby for it. But I know from my sources here in Egypt, from the government, that the EU is preparing a climate farming text law, or whatever you want to call it, which is pretty much in line with what I was just saying, using the same methodologies as we are doing. And maybe I can send this to you and you circulate it. I just received the paper. It was a document which our Ministry of Agriculture has circulated in Egypt. And yeah, so I think I don't have the clear answer because I'm not active, but I know that there are people who are more educated than me in this market, and it will work in Europe. It will come. It needs some cooperation, some association, some joint efforts, and some courage from our side to move on. But ultimately, I'm sure it will work, and it will work even better in Europe than in Egypt.
Simon, maybe you would like to give us some context about what's happening in Europe right now.
I can gladly do so. I mean, Helmi touched on the carbon removal certification mechanism, on which I was also on a very infamous expert group for a little bit, until I was lucky enough to work for the EARA farmers. This is slowly developing, although I think we see, of course, in Europe, the big problem, Helmi, and I think the others too, if we pay 30 euros for a ton in Europe, where a farmer is more like 2,000 to 3,000 euros per hectare of revenue, that's of course not so much of an economic incentives. And then additionally, we have worked quite heavily, and in some sense also rightfully, but I know with the Future Economy Forum, we are always discussing this also with Walter, delegitimized carbon certificates in the European public to an extent that European capital owners are not quite so happy to give part of their share to the farmers, which then to me comes, of course, to the social innovation part, because you said your farmers, of course, are most importantly growing on the esteem and legitimization, appreciation they get for saving nature, the climate, and ourselves. I think it's, to me, also the question on social innovation, if I just bring it back again, how we can turn European farmers in the esteem of the public again into the health creators and the core health regenerators of our European society. And I think there we as EARA, we made a proposal to basically take the learnings from the voluntary carbon markets, take the learnings that Peter touched upon, that we need to look on outcomes. and made a proposal how we can transform these huge 50 billions in European payments, or as you said, 50% of income for some farmers, in a way that they are remunerated for agro-ecosystem health regeneration, for ecosystem services. With that, I would maybe also ask Urs back if in social innovation in your feeble years, what did you learn in things to innovate that grows the emancipation and the enabling of farmers?
Yeah, basically what I was fascinating at the beginning of my career when I started as feeble was that organic was really a social innovation. It was not about the new technology. It was avoiding technologies, and it was really a very bottom-up social innovation. That was amazing, and that's why. And I think that's the reason why organic farming had quite an impact on our society. So meanwhile, it's nothing new, and the optimism we had around organic is a little bit more pessimistically seen. But I think, and it's also that all this kind of productivity, producing and selling organic food on the marketplace, in supermarkets, in big shops, has, because of that, it has a little bit lost its innovative approach. But that's the reality, because a new social innovation gets sucked up by the society, and that's the reality. What is really important is that we need a balance, an equilibrium of all kind of innovation in agriculture. And so social innovation, ecological innovation, economic innovation, but also technological innovation are needed, because if we go back to the 1960, when the Green Revolution started, we were 3 billion people. And meanwhile, we are 8 billion people. So I don't think that they can be fed only by social innovation and by ecological optimization. So we also need technology to do that. There, I'm a little bit more pessimistic than Helmi. I don't see it as black and white, because one problem we cannot overcome at the moment is that we don't have enough farmers anymore, and farmers leave the land and go to the city. So obviously, being a farmer is not such by smallholder farmers is not seen as an attractive future, and that is, for instance, one problem. So we, if we want to go into the direction of diversifying again landscape and diversifying again farms and farmland, integrating landscape elements into farmland, we don't have enough farmers to do that. So we need some technology to do that. the example of strip farming. Contour farming is a good one, how we can use GPS and robot technology to do that. So we need some technology to solve the problem. And we saw, for instance, when we modeled how much with organic farming, how much people can be fed till 2050. And we saw that we can go up to 60% of globally of the land being farmed organically, or it is some kind of the same like any kind of agroecological farming, up to 60% without and still being able to feed the world, the growing population, but under the condition that we do no longer feed cereals to animals, poultry, swine, and so on, and that we convert the entire ruminant production to grass-fed. And by halving the food waste, then we can feed the growing population with up to 60% of organic farming. And that's an ideal scenario, but it won't happen as we see now, because and then we come back to the challenge: how can we change the way people eat, people buy, and so the consumer work will become dramatically more important in the future. And I think that and that's also part of a social innovation, doing consumer work, convincing people to eat in another way. And I think that among within the regenerative agriculture movement, there are so many young, enthusiastic people, so many different approaches. Everybody has its own recipe how he can solve his problems, and to bring all these fantasies and these concepts and this way forwards to the consumer. I think here the regenerative movement could play a very, very important important role. So it's not about convincing farmers only. It's really about interacting, convincing consumers. That's the most important thing for the next 20 years. I hope that I will still live another 20 years so I can contribute to that. And I'm so enthusiastic about doing consumer work.
Great, thanks a lot, Urs, for sharing. I mean, that's I see a lot of common thoughts. So we need really all the best coming together to make this happen. But I have one more question back to you, because you said the organic movement, the biggest innovation was the social one. And I see that exactly the same. And back to you, what do you see we need and have to learn from this for the regenerative movement to kind of bring this over? What things should we do the same? What should we avoid? Where are some traps that we should avoid? What's your take on this? How can we learn from what organic went through for the regenerative movement?
Yeah, the good thing what we learned from organic is that if people start to buy organic, then farmers start to convert. It's not farmers who are the stupid ones. So if they have an opportunity to sell the good quality, the good system they apply, then they do it. But the precondition is that it's bought on the marketplace, and so this and that's why I think for me convincing consumers is the first priority. And maybe Helmi is right. We cannot do that only with massive subsidizing, like the EU tries to do that. So we must find other way to make it attractive for farmers. But the most important thing is that consumer want to buy food from regenerative farms.
Great. I mean, when I look back and when I see my neighbors in organic, what fascinates me always is how that's a community helping each other to solve problems.
That's
you know,
true,
kind
yeah.
of, it's like you have different means and people really help each other. That's much different to how I see it in other farms where it's more kind of working against each other. So how do you see that actually? What can we learn from this? How can we foster that? Because that to me, I feel is very important. That's something I was always jealous about, the organic movement being kind of a conventional farmer. Actually.
Yeah, at the beginning, scientists and policymakers were totally not supportive for organic farmers. They had to do everything themselves. They had to organize themselves. They had their own meetings. They had their own ways of exchanging information, organizing joint events where they try to learn from each other. They organized field visits. Every farmer showed to a group of neighbors his success story, and that's a completely it was a completely neglected community. From neglected by science, neglected by policymaker, and at the beginning also neglected by the consumers, and that's why it was really a social, self-helping, self-organizing movement. And I don't know, we are now in a completely different situation. So maybe we don't have to start as hard as they had to start. And but we have really millions of convincing individual examples. And so I think the individual farmer with his idea of regenerative agriculture is a very important asset for the future.
Thanks a lot for sharing. It was very insightful. So Helmi, what would be your take on this actually? What have you to share on that topic?
I mean, I have already shared my strong belief that even international organizations, even governments who are not the change agents in general terms, are getting the issue. The FAO report, many of you have seen it, December 2023, the hidden costs of our agricultural and food system, $12.7 trillion. It's online, you can see it, FAO. It's not SECAM, it's not the organic movement or the biodynamic movement, it's the FAO writing this. So basically saying this is a totally broken system which we have in the world at the moment. And every single conventional tomato you buy for €1 in your supermarket in Aldi costs us 3 to 4 euros in hidden costs. Huh? So this paradigm shift has to happen in our minds first before it can happen in the community. We are more efficient, we are more productive, we are cheaper if you do the right calculation. And this is a science. Huh? And 60–70% of this comes from health impact. And a whole society, a world society coming out of the pandemic and I don't know what, the One Health idea is getting more and more attention. And it's getting more and more clear that the farmer is our real physician. The farmer takes care of our health. The diet is making all the difference. 60 to 70% of our food hidden costs are related to diet, to our health, and 20% to our impact on the environment, which is climate, biodiversity, water, and I don't know what, and about 10% or something for social job creation, cohesion, and other things. So take this report. This gives me a picture. The world is starting to understand, and we must start to understand. And I am coming from a Demeter movement, biodynamic movement, where it was my pride and my intention to sell the most expensive Demeter Sechem chamomile in the world because it's the most valuable. So my pride was, I'm doing the best job, so I'm getting the highest price. This is what I was doing 40 years ago. Now I'm starting to say, oh, look, I'm doing this and I can be at the same price or cheaper. And I need to change this in my mind. As long as I'm searching for the premium, for the up market, for the niche market, I will stay in 1%, 2%, or 3%. But when I go out and say, hey, I am the one I will be mainstream. If you want or not, I'm already mainstream, but you don't see it. I think this is where we have to start. Combined with IPCC reports, which come out every year saying agriculture, which is a big part of the problem of climate change, is also our quickest win and best bet for a solution. So combine these two messages, and as I said, we developed our economy of love whole system agricultural carbon credits, which, by the way, at the moment, we are able to sell in Egypt to Egyptian companies who have to offset at the Egyptian stock exchange, covered by an Egyptian voluntary carbon market law and the Egyptian Financial Regulatory Authority. So, and I don't think Egypt's government is much more advanced than the European ones. So everything is possible. We just have to recognize we are approaching a different world. What the future needs from us is not our experience from the past. We have to allow a new future to land on the runway in front of us. We have to listen to new ideas. We have to listen to what the world needs. And if we do this, I have no doubt that we will see major system change happening in the agricultural sector, in the food sector, and of course, related, it must be the economic sector. The economics of the world, business economics of the world is in general not working anymore, is not delivering any results it was intending to. And as long as we use this economic system, even for nice Demeter products, organic products, or permaculture products, or whatever products, it's not going to work. So we need to rethink how can we organize our supply chains in a new way? How can we have cooperative models, associative models, economy of love models, and so on? And again, guess what? They are more efficient. We are market leaders in herbal tea in Egypt, and our small, unknown, and unrecognized competition is called Unilever and Lipton. Okay? So if we can do this in Egypt, then everyone can do it. Okay? And it's so we have to be very ambitious, courageous, to really start recognizing that we are the solution and we can do it.
Perfectly. Thanks for sharing, Helmi. So systemic change, and that's how we see it also, and what we work on. So over to Anna for wrapping up, and because we are just getting close in time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Helmi. Those were really, really wonderful wrapping up thoughts that you gave there. The economy of love and learning from each other and going into the future, landing on that runway. And we know we can do it. So many people are proving that. And as you said, there's so many examples, and those need to be showcased and they need to be shared and connected with each other. That's one of the beautiful things about the regenerative movement, is that it really is cooperative and bigging up the farming profession and making it more than dignified, making it something that is at the center of our lives and the economy and health, definitely. So yes, it's great to be part of that movement. Thank you everyone for being part of it and to contributing to it each in the way that we can. The beautiful thing about EARA, for example, the European Alliance, is all those different, completely diverse farmers coming together and sharing and showcasing that it can be done, and taking that voice to Brussels, to Europe, with specific proposals. We invite you all to see our CAP proposal, which is on the EARA website, eara.farm. It's a fantastic proposal, 55 pages, that is really just, every page is a wonderful read. And there's a specific section, the third section, only 10 pages long, that explains the actual specific proposals that EARA farmers have for Brussels. So we really invite you to have a look at that. You also have a policy summary brief, which is only 3 pages, which gives like the overview and the general idea of the vision. But then we really invite you to go into the actual proposal to understand the steps and the first steps, you know, that are on the table to be improved and negotiated as well, but already coming from all that experience from all the farmers. So thank you so much, everyone, for this very interesting session. We'd like to invite you all to please share in the chat some thoughts about how you are leaving this space. What are your takeaways from this space? What are the things that you've learned? What are the things that you would like to share with others, and that we can also learn to improve our sessions in the future? We have another 5 sessions coming up. Every 2 weeks, we'll be joining you on Wednesdays at this very same time. And so we invite you to follow that on the LinkedIn page as well for EARA, where you will be informed of all the wonderful speakers that we have coming up in the next sessions as we delve deeper into these hot topics that we hope will be inspiring and definitely connecting, so that we can all learn on this joint journey. So thank you, everyone, for this wonderful, wonderful evening. And yes, please drop your thoughts in the chat, your feedback, your takeaways, your words of feedback, improvement, encouragement. Anything you want to say is most welcome. We will read it with love.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Anna.
folks.
So nice. And while the others are putting it in the chat, maybe we can give for the last time the voice to the 3 farmers, maybe Peter, Beate, and then Diego, to share their last impressions.
Thanks, Simon. So yeah, thanks a lot to everyone. And all I can say, have a nice evening all together. Over to Diego.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what was said. The consumer aspect is super interesting, as Urs is saying. It's gonna be uphill battle, I think, because as things get more complicated, people are gonna look more into their pockets. But if what Helmi says is true, then we will be cheaper than conventional. So let's see what the future awaits for us. I like very much Helmi's approach of selling the most expensive chamomile. I also sell the most expensive parsley in my farmers markets on Mondays in my town, and people seem to have adapted to pay in it. So it's good to reassure yourself, no, with the prices. And I think that is very important in the regenerative movement, that we talk about also the financial well-being of our farms. And Beate, who better to finish?
Yeah, I can only second that, because I'm also saying the most expensive olive oil over here. So there seems to be a common thread here, and I think that wraps it up nicely, because we indirectly answered the question or the topic of tonight's webinar without ever prompting it to our guests as a direct question, because it seems that the system that we are targeting and what we are living as farmers is just so promising, and there's so much common sense in there, as well as value that is inherent, that it ultimately will lead us to a system change anyway. So thanks everyone for finding that conclusion, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks
a
everyone.
lot.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yes, feel free to open your mic and say goodbye before you leave. Friends, thank you to everyone who's joined from around the world. And yes, lovely to see all these familiar faces and all those new faces as well. So thank you for your time and your passion.